Advantage McLaren in the F1 Constructors title fight as Lando Norris secures sprint pole at the Losail International Circuit in Qatar. Elsewhere, Sergio Perez, well, he endured his latest shocker and will provisionally start the sprint in P16. From Racing News 365, my name is Nick Golding, and I'm delighted to be joined, as always, by lead editor Ian Parks. And Ian, well, it's a Friday in Qatar. We've got to start with McLaren enter this weekend with a 24-point lead over Ferrari. If they score 21 points more than the famous red team this weekend, they will leave Qatar with the Constructors' title. And, well, based on sprint quali, it is very much advantage McLaren.
I'm really disappointed, mate. I thought you would have given a mention to my latest backdrop. You always comment on my backdrops.
I was going to. In my defense, I was going to, but I have a really clever thing I was going to use later on in the episode. So let's imagine what I've...
Okay, shall we quickly rewind and go for it? No, as you say, mate, great day for McLaren, particularly after coming out of what happened in the Las Vegas Grand Prix, where we discussed the woes across that weekend. Cold temperatures, that surface, that track, just not getting to grips with it at all. Here, they thought they were going to be in with a good chance, and boy, have they proven themselves correct. Absolutely nailed by Lando Norris. What a great performance across qualifying. Absolute perfection. The fastest driver across SQ1, SQ2, and ultimately, when it mattered most, in SQ3. Pipping George Russell to the top spot on the grid. 1 and 3 for McLaren going into the sprint, 4 and 5 for Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc. As you say, 24-point gap between those two teams. And right now, it's looking very good for McLaren going into the sprint. 8 points for the winner, 7 points for second, and all the way down to 8th place with 1 point, of course. So every point going to count going into the sprint, going into the Grand Prix. Will it go down to the wire in Abu Dhabi next weekend? Not quite sure at this stage, but definitely advantage McLaren. First blood McLaren, whatever way you want to look at it, they've definitely got the upper hand going into the sprint at least. And if Lando can reproduce that in Grand Prix qualifying on Saturday, then they're going to be very well placed for gaining those additional points that they require going into that last race in Abu Dhabi. Could they clinch it here? I think it's going to take at least one poor result from Ferrari, from either Charles or Carlos across the weekend. If McLaren are going to do it, if Lando and Oscar are going to finish in strong positions in both the sprint and the Grand Prix itself on Sunday.
Now, of course, in the podcast on Monday, my bold prediction was that McLaren will win the Constructors this weekend. And actually, I've done some maths. If Lando and Oscar finish the sprint race and the main race on Sunday, where they're going to start the sprint race tomorrow, then actually McLaren will leave Qatar with the Constructors title. But actually, going into this weekend, everyone was thinking McLaren, they're going to be the favourites. Qatar, it suits their car brilliantly. However, it was actually Charles Leclerc who topped the only practice session of the weekend. Ferrari then went into sprint quali with better expectations than they initially had because Leclerc and Sainz both looked good in the practice session. However, 4th for Carlos Sainz, 5th for Charles Leclerc. Leclerc himself quite dejected and actually said that the session was, back to reality, was his words. Ferrari do have some catching up to do, not only in the sprint race, but actually before qualifying on Saturday evening for the main race on Sunday.
Yeah, it's going to be, at this stage, damage limitation for Ferrari in the sprint race, that's for sure. And then it's going to be a matter of what can they do to address the SF24 going into Grand Prix qualifying? Because most definitely, this McLaren is working at this trap. It's a low tide, with the two key points about this track that we saw throughout qualifying. There's really low tire degradation and there's high track evolution. It meant that throughout qualifying, the cars were basically just churning out the laps rather than coming in and taking on fresh rubber as you would ordinarily get in a normal qualifying session. This was far from a normal qualifying session. As I say, it's a track that's not really used much throughout the course of the year. So what we saw in that one and only practice session was a lot of just getting used to the circuit again, clearing it of the dust that was in place around what is one of the fastest circuits on the calendar. Lando Norris absolutely called it and said it's a brilliant track for racing around, and I'm getting that. And for him to produce the 3 laps he did across sprint qualifying, just getting quicker and quicker throughout all 3 sessions. As I say, it was a perfect session for him, and that has really put Ferrari on the back foot going into the sprint itself and predominantly going into Grand Prix qualifying, because if they come out of it again, 4th and 5th position behind the McLaren 1-3, then it's going to be very, very difficult, barring any McLaren tragedy, for Ferrari to come out of this with having closed that gap once again, as they have done over the last 4 Grand Prix, because they have really reeled in McLaren across the Americas triple header and again in Las Vegas last weekend.
You mentioned a couple of minutes ago, sorry, that obviously it's George Russell who joins Lando Norris on the front row for the sprint race. And I mean, George is a driver in fine form at the moment, was dominant in Las Vegas, has done brilliantly in sprint qualifying in Qatar, 0.4 of a second quicker than Lewis Hamilton, who's down in 7th. And it's all kind of happening at the time when obviously Mercedes are getting ready to say goodbye to Lewis. George is almost, you can feel it, starting to step up, knowing he's going to be the team's leader, at least for next season, with Kimi Antonelli alongside him. He's the number 63 driver, of course, and interestingly, he was just 0.063 of a second slower than Lando Norris. I mean, George could be a bit of a nuisance for McLaren, both in the sprint race, but actually in the main race itself.
Yeah, it was for all the world it was looking like it was going to be a McLaren front row lockout, because at one stage in that SQ3, Lando and Oscar were 1 and 2, and then George fucks up and splits the 2 McLaren boys. George has so far looked really strong, and he's living up to his prediction that he made at the end of the Las Vegas Grand Prix, where he felt coming into this end of season triple header that Mercedes would be really strong here. Now, he has looked very strong. His teammate Lewis Hamilton, so-so. For a stage there, Lewis had the purple sectors in SQ3, and he was looking like he was going to be on for a good position as well, certainly pushing the top 2 rows of the grid. But ultimately, he's down in 7th position, I think, Nick, if I'm right in saying, behind Max.
Yeah, 7th.
In 6th position. So, yeah, he's definitely got a bit of work to do, Lewis, behind his teammate, that's for sure, if he's to get anywhere near the top 3 in the sprint, and if he's to push it likewise in the Grand Prix qualifying session on Saturday as well.
On the topic of your background, and here we go, this is the point I was going to make. This season, Ian, we can always rely on you for giving our audience an incredible backdrop. Something which is also becoming very reliable is Sergio Perez being eliminated in the first phase of a qualifying session. I mean, it's getting difficult now. Max Verstappen P6, Checo P16. We've criticised Checo a lot this season. We discussed it in the podcast again because he's just having an abysmal year, basically. But then we've praised him as well at the times when we think it's looked like he's starting to bounce back. Our audience over recent races have all said to us as well, come on, guys, why do we keep discussing Checo? And the reason is because, quite simply, yet again, 10 places he's qualified behind his teammate. Red Bull are all but done in the F1 Constructors title fight. I mean, he's got to go. Come on, this is P16 at a circuit where he should never be getting knocked out in the first part. It's surely just too much now, yet again.
Yeah, I'm not going to dwell too much on Checo, because, as you say, we are getting those comments as to why we keep on talking about him. And obviously, yes, we are talking about him because with the way he's performing at the moment, he's looking very much like he's going to be out of that Red Bull seat. And it comes down to Liam Lawson or Yuki Tsunoda to get that promotion. While Liam has bounced back today with a great qualifying performance. Yuki was unable to make it out of SQ1.
Yeah.
He starts 1 place behind Checo, whereas Liam managed to make it into SQ3 and he starts 10th. He did have a lap deleted in SQ3, but then it would have only gone in 1 place higher than Nico Hulkenberg. But nevertheless, Liam Lawson has done a great job. He knows he didn't do a great job in Las Vegas, and he really needs to put it out the fire for these next 2 Grand Prix. This weekend, of course, in Qatar, and next weekend in Abu Dhabi, if he's to be really in the shout, in the mix for those end of season discussions that we know are going to take place inside Red Bull with regards to what to do with the number 2 seat for next season alongside Max Verstappen. But just quickly to conclude on Checo Perez for this time around, 8 successive qualifying sessions, 5 Grand Prix, 3 sprint qualifying, in which he has now failed to make it into the top 10 shootout. That is just nowhere near good enough. In any other team, that would be cause for saying, right, it's time for you to go now. Thank you ever so much for your service. You got to wonder, when it comes to those end of season discussions, as I'd mentioned, between Christian Horner, between Helmut Marko, they've got to be looking at it and thinking, thanks, Checo, for your service. It's time for us to move on with somebody new and fresh now.
And of course, let's mention Max quickly, because he'll start the sprint race in P6, and it does look like Red Bull don't have a car this weekend that can compete for the victory with McLaren, probably not with Ferrari either, but it looks like Max's target is probably going to be both in the sprint race and the main race, despite now having the 4th title under his belt. I think a top 5 has got to be the target for Max, surely, this weekend.
That's looking to be the case. Definitely that Red Bull is behind both McLaren, both Ferrari, and certainly one Mercedes, given the way George and Lewis have performed, as I've just discussed. I'm not saying Max is going to take it easy. Of course he's not. You know, he's a driver that, even though he's got that 4th title in his pocket now, he's going to go out there and still give it his all for both himself and for Red Bull, even though, as you mentioned, that 55-point gap between Red Bull and McLaren in the Constructors' Championship is looking unbridgeable at this stage, given the performance of the cars that we've seen across sprint qualifying so far. And he might be able to improve in the main qualifying session. At this stage, it's looking unlikely, but certainly Max is going to go out with as much of a bang as possible. Certainly not a whimper. As I say, he's going to want to give it his all because he is a 4-time world champion. And that's what Max Verstappen does. He gives it all, his all, every time he goes out on track.
Absolutely. And just before we get on to our final talking point, I'll go through the top 10 provisionally for the sprint race. It is, of course, Lando Norris on sprint pole ahead of George Russell in 2nd, Piastri in 3rd, Sainz in 4th, Leclerc in 5th, Verstappen in 6th, Lewis Hamilton in 7th, and crucially, Pierre Gasly in 8th, Nico Hulkenberg in 9th, and Liam Lawson in P10. And the reason that is crucial is because obviously in the sprint race, points are only awarded to the top 8. If the sprint race was to end with the drivers finishing in the same position as they are starting it, then, well, we'll be going into the Qatar Grand Prix with Haas and Alpine both level on points. Ian, it is so tight in the battle for 6th. Haas on 50 points, Alpine on 49, RB in 46. Those 3 teams, all of the drivers starting the sprint race in the top 10. And as Nico Hulkenberg summed up in Las Vegas, every single point matters. And that is proof of the case that we can expect in the sprint race a great tussle at least for P8.
Absolutely. And it's those 3 drivers only in the mix because their teammates, Kevin Magnussen for Haas starts 15th. As I said, Yuki Tsunoda starts 17th behind Perez. And I think Esteban Ocon in the other Alpine is 18th, if I remember correctly. So it literally is between Hulkenberg, Gasly, and Lawson for that P8 position, pending any retirements ahead of them. Yeah. And there's always a possibility around here. We've seen incidents happen before. We've seen tire blowouts, of course. So there's always that possibility. This is the kind of circuit that does lend itself to a potential incident. But at this stage, yes, you're right. That P8 right now in that sprint, every point is crucial. And those 3 guys, you can bet your bottom dollar, are going to be going hell for leather for that 8th place. It's going to be a very intriguing battle. And again, they've proven themselves as well, not only in sprint qualifying, but you can imagine it's going to be a battle royal as well to get into that top 10 as well in Grand Prix qualifying on Saturday. And you can imagine their teammates are going to be pushing as well. In particular, Yuki Tsunoda in the RV and Kevin Magnussen in the Haas. We know Esteban Ocon in the Alpine has really, really struggled of late, particularly in qualifying trim. And I don't see him being any kind of factor. But Yuki Tsunoda and Kevin Magnussen will definitely have a point to prove in Grand Prix qualifying. They're going to want to push themselves into the mix for those top 10 positions on Sunday.
Absolutely. Said absolutely again. I think I need to change my name now to Nick Absolutely Golding. But Ian, just very quickly, because I can see that unlike last season, it looks pretty chilly there. We've got to do bold predictions, of course, a double whammy because we've got the sprint race and qualifying. And following your complaint in Las Vegas, I'm going to let you go first with your bold predictions for Saturday.
Bold prediction, right? I should have thought of that before we come on air, shouldn't I? Nick? Bold prediction. I can't see anything beyond the Lando Norris victory for number one, which I appreciate isn't that bold. And I'm going to go for Liam Lawson getting that 8th position for RB in the sprint.
Okay, well, I'm going to join you because I can't see anybody beating Lando in the sprint race. And I'm going to say a McLaren 1-2 in qualifying because I think Oscar Piastri has got a bit more pace that he's not yet unlocked. Ian, get yourself somewhere warm. For those who've been watching this F1 update, be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comment section below on anything we have discussed. And of course, please do give us your bold predictions. On top of that, if you can like and subscribe to the Racing News 365 channel, well, that will be very much appreciated. From myself and Ian, we will see you on Saturday after the sprint race and qualifying. See you later.
Take care, folks, as always.